Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem, and welcome to this show with Ben Hodgson. I reached out to Ben recently. Well, actually, he reached out to me because he needed all my media stuff to cover the X-Pyr. He raced in the last X-Pyr. This time he's doing kind of what I do for the Red Bull X-Alps as a roving live commentator and doing media. So he needed a bunch of my camera gear that I was given by Marco with Paragliding Live a couple years ago. So, you know, all the mounts and all the stuff I used to do all that, it's all complicated, dangerous carrying all that stuff. So we sat down to just talk about that side of things. And by the end of it, I thought, man, I got to get you on the show. I of course, knew about Ben and some of the racing he's done. He's from South Africa. He and I have very similar backgrounds with boats. He's been working on crew of big boats for a long time. But yeah, he raced in the X-Pyr. His sister was a supporter because his team wasn't able to help him right at the very last second. So he brought in his sister who knew nothing about paragliding. So we have some laughs about his last X-Pyr, and it all went really well, and they had a blast and a really cool sister-brother team. Now he's raced in the XBerg down in South Africa, which unfortunately is not happening anymore. He's done a lot of hike and fly racing down in Brazil. I didn't know that was such a big thing down there. But so we also talk about being a supporter. He was Gabe Jansen's supporter in the last Red Bull X-Alps, who Gabe was, fighting real hard in the top 5 through, I believe, day 6. And nobody heard about him. It was amazing. I think he's only been flying for 3 years, but super hungry and gotten a ton of hours. Those two had raced together, and Ben decided to support him, so he was kind of the main supporter in that role. And so we get to hear a lot about how that campaign went and just what it's like to be on the other side. He's got plenty of experience in both as an athlete and as a supporter. He's flown all over the world, super passionate, and he's going to be covering the X-Pyr in just a couple weeks here. So, well, actually, by the time this comes out, the X-Pyr will keep going. So, yeah, we talk all kinds of things, risk and flying and hike and fly and training and just doing cool stuff. Enjoy this one. Ben Hodgson. Cheers. Ben, thanks for coming on the show, man. It's been fun to chat with you here in the last little bit, and sounds like you got a fun gig coming up with the X-Pyr, similar to what I've been doing with the X-Alps the last couple times. You've competed in the race. You've got quite a history here with a lot of hike and fly racing, with the Borns to Fly a bunch of times, and the Chablais and the XBerg and the X-Pyr, of course, and several others you mentioned. We'll get into that. But was your first out in the X-Berg in 2017? Was that your first race out in South Africa?
Hey, Gavin. First of all, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I've followed this podcast for ages and never thought I'd be here. So super cool to be chatting to you. I did a little mini solo hike and fly mission down off the back of Solari's Pass, which is down near Cape Town, and not a very good place to go hike and fly. But it ended up with like a 20k flight and a sleep out in the mountains, or there are more hills, and then a long walk back. I was studying down there at university. My first race was XBerg in 2017.
Is he still doing the XBerg? Because I remember talking to Nick Nanens about it. It sounds like an awesome race, but it's not still going, right?
No, they stopped it. I actually wanted to go out when I was training for XBerg. I wanted to go out to do it again, and that year they decided to call it off, just because I think a lot of organization, and they'd kind of done what they wanted to do. It's quite a cool concept, because it's not just hike and fly, it's trail runners versus mountain bikers versus hike and fly athletes, and they sort of set the route. Yeah. So there's no clear person who's going to win. So yeah, it was a cool concept, but it's tricky there. It's all in national parks. It needs a lot of organization to get it running.
And you're from Joburg?
Yeah, more little farming town called Escort. I was born in Joburg and then moved down to the farm at a pretty young age. But I learned to fly in down in Cape Town, where I was down in Stellenbosch studying engineering, and I learned to fly down there.
And that's Table Mountain.
Yeah, more. I mean, we learn. There's little training slopes nearby, and then I sort of got into the cross country scene and spent a lot of time in Porterville. And then also around Stellenbosch, Franschhoek's a good site, Solari's Pass. They're cool sites because you're quite close to the sea and you can still go XE from them. We spend a lot of time. I used to finish lectures and then run up the mountain behind Stellenbosch and go for an evening flight. And we had the Sevens rugby world sort of cup rugby on there, and I flew over the stadium with a South African flag underneath me and made it on TV and all of this stuff. Yeah.
Before we move on more into kind of hike and fly and your history and stuff, I haven't spent a ton of time in South Africa, but I sailed, around Cape of Good Hope and came down from the eastern side. We were up in Mozambique. This was back in 2010, I guess. So we did, back and forth between Madagascar and Mozambique a couple times, and then down the East Coast. I only had one buddy on that who was not a sailor. And that's, one of the scarier places in the world to sail a boat. So that was pretty intense. And then, spent a bunch of time in Cape Town, but I was doing a lot of maintenance on the boat. So I didn't get to do a ton. And then years later, we went back, started, where did we fly in? I think we flew into Joburg, and then we did that. You might have seen, we did a little outside TV thing up in Malawi. And so we went up through Botswana, which I loved, and Zambia and around to Malawi. And so I've done a little bit of travel down there, but I remember our time in both on the coast. And then when we did that road trip up through, we didn't fly in South Africa at all. The destination was Malawi and to do the flying there on the Massif. But I found it a really tense place, just in terms of security, and it just seemed, especially Joburg, I felt, I've never seen so much barbed wire. And I remember getting off the boat. A guy picked me up that was in Durban, and getting off the boat, and we had to go check in because that was first stop coming in from Mozambique. And so we had to do, the customs thing, which is pretty traditional. And a guy from the club, the yachting club there, he was taking me to the customs agent or whatever it was. And we stopped at a stoplight in the city, and he was from Durban. I mean, that's where he lived. And we stopped, and I started rolling down my window, and he almost like punched me, just roll that fucking window up. And whoa, what's going on? He said, they will come out and shoot you in the face. And I was just, wait, what? I mean, I've spent some time in some dicey places, but I'm curious to just get your quick thoughts on, because people go down for World Cups at Porterville and fly there and that kind of thing. And, there's been some really cool long distance flights that have gone down back all the way to Neville Hewitt when he broke the record. What's that like? Put it into perspective. Is this overblown, or was I just, being a scaredy cat? Because I just felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Just that there was a lot of tension between the blacks and whites, and it was, I don't know. It was uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think it is generally very overblown. I always tell people I still think, I'm very lucky. I've traveled a lot with my work, and I still think South Africa is probably one of the best places in the world to go visit. And that's not from a biased point because I live there, but it's not the easiest place to live. And, you've got to be streetwise. There's places where you go where you need to be careful, but you can go there and you can have, a month's holiday and have the time of your life and be actually really quite safe. So as long as you do your research and you don't, the people who get into trouble there are going to places that you should never go to. And obviously, how do you know that as a tourist? But you've got to do your research. But if you want to go fly there, if you're part of a comp, it's such a cool country. It's so diverse. The food's amazing. And generally the people are amazing too. It's got this sort of bad reputation that's quite sad, and things happen and it gets focused on that. But
Sure.
yeah, the majority of people there are actually fantastic and really cool.
I'm drawing a blank. What are your favorite Barbies called? Your barbecues?
Braais, yeah.
The Braais,
Yeah.
right? Oh my God, the food we had down there was incredible. Yeah, and it's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
Gosh,
But I do actually have
like you said, really diverse.
a bit of a funny story which is related to this, because my sister was my supporter during X-Pyr, and she hadn't really, she'd been to the UK. My mother's originally from the UK, but she'd never really been to Europe. And she lives in Kenya, which is, Nairobi's pretty chaotic. And so she flew out, and it was like 2 days before the start of the race. And she had to go into France to pick up some socks, or, I needed something before the race. And it was sort of late evening, and I drove up. And she was super confused because suddenly everyone was speaking French and they'd just been speaking Spanish. And, she was just like, well, we didn't go through a border or, any of this. And then on the way back, I was like, oh, well, you better drive the van. I've got a T5 van, and I was like, you better drive the van so you get used to driving it. So the sun's gone down, and we leave the sort of shopping center, and we come to this 4-way stop, and the lights are red, and she just goes straight through the red lights. And I'm like, wow, Megs, you can't do that. And basically, like with us, we grew up when it's dark, you don't stop at traffic lights. Sorry, we call them robots.
Ah, right.
So she, it was just like bred into her, and she's been straight through this red light. And I thought, oh God, now, I'm going to have all these fines and everything. So it was. So there is, there is a
really
bit.
funny.
Yeah, there's a reason we like that, but I wouldn't let it put you off visiting. It's a really cool place.
One of my kind of loose supporters, and actually he was a client on the boat for many, many years, a guy named Keith Cockram. He's raising his daughter, he and his wife and his daughter, they're living in Cape Town. He's from Texas.
Yeah.
And she's Ukrainian actually, and been really involved in the kind of the anti-war thing. But they live in Cape Town and just love it. And they can't imagine being anywhere else.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, it's a stunning place. Okay, so you do the X-Pyr, the XBerg in 2017. Was that about when you learned to fly, or how long? When did you start flying?
So I started actually in 2011. I went.
Oh, wow.
I got into it. My father flew hot air balloons. So from a very young age, I couldn't see over the basket. I used to look out the little footwell and used to go blasting around in a hot air balloon with him. And then I was in New Zealand. I did like a 3-month exchange thing when I was 16. And I went on a tandem down in Queenstown, and just thought it was the coolest thing. But I thought it was like a pilot's license. I thought it was you did that when you were older type thing. And then I was a big kite surfer when I was studying down in Stellenbosch, and used to kite every day basically. And before that, I used to do a lot of dirt bikes, enduros and motorbike racing. And we sort of kited all summer. And then one of my best friends who I was kiting with was basically the season ends there, and as you go into winter, the winds all, the trade, not the trades, they call it Cape Doctor, the southeaster dies off. And we were like, oh, what are we going to do? We don't spend too much time studying. So he's a friend who we kited with flew, and they were like, oh, you guys should try paragliding. And so we went for this kind of demo day with Barry. A lot of people know him, right? Runs a guiding school there. And I just fell in love. I think my first, we did a bit of training and then signed up, and I think my third flight was 2 hours. We had perfect conditions, and I was just soaring on this tiny little hill that probably shouldn't have been soarable, and just fell as I sold everything I had, motorbikes, the works, and just to pay for. I was a student, I had no money, and then just to pay for it, and then got into sort of XE, and my first flight, and did like a 10K XE, and I just thought, this is mad. So gave up partying and saved all my money for the weekends to drive up to Porterville and started flying. So that was kind of the start. And then
I'd be curious, when you learned how to fly, was that the end of your kite surfing, or have you kept with kite surfing?
No,
because you and I have a long background of kite surfing.
Yeah,
I never, we had that whole kite surfing expedition all the way around the world, and spent a lot of time doing it, but it never grabbed me like paragliding.
Yeah,
I mean, it was it was fun, but not the same.
So kind of the same. I still do it, but I constantly go back to it. So flying's my staple. It's my big focus. It's, if I had to pick one, it would be flying. And then I don't kite for like 6 months, and then I go kiting and I'm like, oh man, why do I stop this? It's so much fun. And then I'm mad on it for like another 3 months, and then it kind of drifts away. It also became a bit like work, like you. I work on a sailing yacht, and I was sort of an unofficial kite instructor on that. So I was teaching the guy who owned the boat and doing kind of tours with him, which was great fun. I mean, it's fun work, but like all things, when your sport becomes work,
it's work. It's different.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. Sure. Where's the boat?
So that boat I actually left. I was on there for 6 years, and we sailed. Well, we tried to go around the world, but we got hit by lightning twice and a few other things. But we got out to French.
So this is a super yacht?
Yes, yeah. But a sailing super yacht. Yeah. So family owned.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And now recently I'm on a racing yacht. So it's 100-foot maxi. But I'm an engineer, not a sailor. I've learned to sail, but
And you're up in the UK now.
At the moment I am, but I'm normally based. We do 3 months in the Caribbean, and then the rest of the time I'm based around the Med, based in Mallorca, and then we do regattas around the Med.
How do you get your flying time?
That's the interesting question. So I used to be full time, and that was a really big gap in my flying. Sort of to rewind from XBerg. I then started working. XBerg was my kind of first year into working, and suddenly I went from a student having time to working, and my flying really, I still flew, but really not a lot. And then I was on the boats, and I was full-time on the boats, and again flew, but sort of, I just didn't have the time to really give it the attention it needs. And then I ended up working rotation. So then I was 3 months on, 3 months off. And that's when, I'd always dreamed to do XBerg, and that's where I kind of went, right, now's my time in my life when I can do it, because I've got 6 months of the year where I can focus on it. But it's a funny one.
And was 24 your first one?
First XBerg?
XBerg?
Yeah, I've only done one, and that was the first one. So I started about 2 years before, really, and set it as my goal, and really did not think I would get into it. I was probably, when I started, I was maybe 150-hour pilot. And
whoa.
Yeah, no, it was super low. And so in 2 years, I just really gave it full steam, and did a whole bunch of hike and fly races, did a whole bunch of SIV, and went from flying a high B to a zeolite by the end of it, and still was very out of my depth. But my whole goal was that XBerg is the dream, and if I don't get there, the journey up to it is so cool anyways, that if that dream doesn't happen, then it's been a cool journey, and we keep trying. So that's
I'm curious, why X-Pyr? Why was that one that was the magnet, as opposed to I don't know, Eiger or X-Alps or a million other ones? Borns to Fly. I know you've done Borns to Fly a bunch of times, but why that one? What was the one? Why did that pique your interest so much?
So I think the two things. I actually went to the Pyrenees when I left South Africa straight away, and I just thought it was such a cool place. And it kind of reminded me of home a bit. Some of the mountains, there's some similarities. But the real answer was X-Alps, it was always between X-Alps and XBerg. They're the two big ones. And I thought, if I'm going to do one, there's more chance of me doing XBerg. And I also liked initially the fact of it seemed a bit more like undercover. XBerg, X-Alps, there's so much limelight, there's all the sponsorship, and we get onto that. But, XBerg, I thought that I could do it more, not racing and more as an adventure. And it still had that, possibility. So that was the dream for it.
I don't know the Pyrenees very well. I did a World Cup in Targason, whenever that was, a couple years ago. Stunning. I mean, I've driven through them a few times. I've flown a little bit, mostly on the south side, on the Spain side. But what I hear from people who have done the race is it is a lot more adventure. It's way harder on the support teams because the roads are tough. But also in a lot of ways can be more dicey. You haven't done the X-Alps, but you've obviously flown a lot in the Alps. But I don't know why. Is that because the terrain? Is that because of the winds? What is it that can make it kind of sketchy?
Yeah, the big thing's the wind. The range does to a degree, but it doesn't really block your prevailing winds like the Alps do. So, we all know about Foon and stuff in the Alps, and you kind of, you have your windows where the Massif, if you like, blocks your prevailing winds and you get all your micro stuff. Whereas I think the Pyrenees is, because of its location and because it's a bit lower, you don't always get that effect. So you have a lot of wind on the south side, and obviously it's quite regularly it's quite a strong southwesterly wind. So you fly it a bit more like portable, really, with these, you're flying thermic sides, but you're aware of the wind, as opposed to, I think you got to be a lot more careful diving into the lee side in the Pyrenees. And then, it's just a lot more remote. Hey? There's valleys there, which was also my big attraction. There's valleys there that there's not much in it. Whereas the Alps, you can get lost in the Alps, but you're never too far away from something. Whereas the Pyrenees, it's a bit more wild and remote.
Yeah, that was something that took me really years in the Alps of flying. You'd bust through some col and you're tall and it's glaciated and it's epic, and it doesn't matter where you bust through, there's going to be a village. In fact, I remember Paul Gusherbauer telling me that, hey, never always make the next move. There's always going to be a field. And that's gotten me in some serious trouble. I mean, I've flown down some river canyons where it's just, God, I wish I would have taken that last field back there, and just, oh God. And it's always worked. He's right. But man, you can, there is always something, but it feels deep, but then you're not that deep.
Yeah. So jumping back, the other thing with the Pyrenees as a south side, I think can be, there's areas that are known to be quite strong, if you like. And it's probably, you're more south, it's hotter, like around Castellón-de-Sus on the punchy days, it's strong flying, and maybe that has built a reputation too.
I always found in my X-Alps campaigns that the scouting and the research and the weather and figuring out and kind of having option A, B, C for getting between a couple waypoints was such a big lift, especially for someone who's not from there. That was coming in for me from the States, or from you from South Africa or the UK. Is that a pretty big deal with the X-Pyr as well, or can you kind of show up? Because it's west to east. There are the various waypoints, but when you look at the history of the track logs, there's not a ton of variation. the big things are, when they put that X in the last one, that was really cool. So you had to go the opposite direction for a while, but is that a big part? Is that a big part of the kind of prep?
Yeah. I mean, when I did it, I spent about 10 days before the race, kind of scouting, not everywhere, but really looking at, there's some key places where you can cross. You can't, I mean, on really good days, you can probably cross anywhere, but there's some key places to cross the main spine, if you like. And as well as your supporter, there's not, there's only a few places where there's tunnels or roads, passes that you can get over. So that you need to be aware of, where you can make those moves. And then the north side, I didn't spend that much time on the north side. Most of my scouting was on the south side, and it cost me a bit, just knowing lines and being aware of areas and kind of getting stuck. But that's also part of the racing. And I think this edition will be quite interesting, because there's a lot of local pilots in this edition, and it'll be quite interesting to see in the areas where they're from, whether that gives them a big advantage or not. There's some tricky spots and tricky places and valleys they've got to cross, and from what I've been told from a lot of the locals, there's some tricks to doing it, and you might see some interesting stuff go on there.
Did you feel, with your Borns to Fly and the Chablais and some of the other hike and flies races that you'd done, was that the most valuable prep going into the X-Pyr, or was it something else? And I know you got to tell the story about your sister, that you had your team set up, team couldn't go, and then your sister came in who knew nothing, right? About paragliding, really?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with that and then get on to the prep side. So I sort of had a team, and then various reasons it sort of didn't. Yeah, they had family issues and things. And so I phoned my sister up, and I just needed someone, and it was about 3 weeks.
And she's in Kenya at this point?
She was in Kenya, yeah. And she had actually done a horse race across Patagonia, a 10-day self-supported horse race. So I thought, she'll be up for it, and we've got a good relationship. So gave her a shout, and she was super keen, and she came over, and I mean, the first time she saw me fly was literally the day before the start. We kind of went and hiked up Larun, and then went over the back, and then there's a site once you're out of airspace that you can go and kind of soar. And so we went, and she was like, "Oh wow, this is super cool," but I had no idea about it. And so I set her up with a tracker, and I just said, I'll tell you where to go, and all I need you to do really is food and water and hydration, and I'll do everything else. And I mean, she was a rock star. Hey? She was amazing. But it was quite funny because she got interviewed twice by Judith, and Judith sort of asking her all these questions about the race and about me. And so she's got it there, and she says, Meg, so we've seen Ben hiking up, and he's about to launch, and what is his plan for the day? Is he going to try get onto the south side? Is he staying north? And she just sort of looks at her with big eyes and just goes, well, I don't know. Hey, I've never done this before. And then,
that's great.
And she just had, every question she asked her, and then she sort of went on, you guys had a bit of a disadvantage. Some teams have 2 supporters, some have 3, and she's just like, do they? Oh, cool. I don't know. just winging it. So it was, but we made so many friends there, and everyone loved it because she was just so excited and so up with adventure. And I'd see her, I'd send her a pin drop at this possible launch, and I'd be like, oh, she's there. If not, I'll find her at the next one. And I'd be hiking up, and next thing, there's a video of her just like doing this dance on top of the hill because she's so stoked that she's at the right place and not lost. And so no, it was great fun. It was super cool.
Did that experience, had you ever been a supporter
Not
before you supported Gabe in the X-Alps?
No. So Gabe was the first time I'd supported. Yeah.
I'm curious because you had said yesterday when we were just chatting about other stuff before we were recording today, you were saying that because your sister was really, she came into it last minute and didn't know about paragliding, it's like you said, it's, out, okay, just come there and you'd probably give her a pin or something, but you were obviously running your own support crew in a sense. You're telling her where to go. So you were having to decide what launches and aspect and time of day and ground navigation, all the things that, for me, I didn't do any of that stuff. That was always my team did all that for me. Did that really slow you down? Did you learn a lot about it? Did that end up being great? Was it too much? I'd be curious, in the moment, was it, what was that like?
I would say it was a mix of both. For me, it was really cool because it was my adventure of crossing the Pyrenees, so I was doing everything. And in terms of the racing, and obviously I couldn't have done it without Megs, she was so good at cooking me food and, up 2 hours before me. But in terms of the flying and the hiking, I did everything. So it was really my adventure, which was really cool. But it is a lot more load and it is slow. And, to give you an example, I think it was the third day and I got, and this is another funny story, but I got to cross the main chain and I'd sort of flown a bit slow in the morning and the guys, I was not far off the front pack and they all got over and I got stuck on a little ridge just before getting onto the main spines by a place called Loudenville. And it's kind of one of the main highways through. And then I relaunched and got up and I was sort of half soaring, half climbing up the main spine. And as I was climbing up, I could just see the cloud cover coming down sort of onto the top of the peaks and just shut everything down. And I was like, oh, gee, okay, I'm not going to get through there. And then there was a big rainstorm coming from the other side. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I can't fly over. So what, I hadn't really planned, at the start of the day, I thought, oh yeah, fly thermal up there, cross the easy place and off we go. And so I'm sitting there and I sit on this bit where there's a bit of lift and I'm start looking at the map and I'm like, okay, well, there's a lot of airspace in that first section of the Pyrenees, which is tricky to navigate. But I'm looking for a road for Megs to go through and there's one sort of in the complete wrong direction. So I message her and I'm like, hey, Megs, I can't get through here. Go to this road. I'm going to fly towards that road, land, and then, we'll hike. And then I start flying there and then I'm like, oh, but hang on, I can go south. East, rather. So I turn around, send another message. I'm like, hey, Megs, wait, actually, I can go east and there's that's the right direction. And there's a road further down there that I can then go through. So, and then I lose 100 meters and then I'm climbing up again and, I can see the storm coming and there's just so much going on and trying to look on this little phone screen. And, so that really cost me. I mean, that I really lost everyone who got over was gone. And in the build up to that, I'm trying to think the name, it's a famous cycling place. Anyways, I'd kind of flown off there and I was with Leonard Oblak and he had this sort of route across the high terrain and it made, when I looked at it afterwards, it was a great learning thing to do because, he was so much more efficient just by, I went on this mega glide down the valley in the morning going, wow, this is awesome, and then hiked around and literally was hiking up to launch again. And he came screaming over my head, and I'd lost 2 hours on him. And that was pure route choice, should have just glided across, landed high, hiked up 9:30, 10 o'clock start. And, in hindsight, pretty basic stuff, but you have so much.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of hits. And I think in X-Alps, it was really interesting, Gabe and I working together, and we'll get onto that. But going back to the main spine there, so I ended up pretty much starting to fly south, and then the rain hit me, and I literally had to spiral down and land in probably the worst place in this valley in Loudenville, which I knew, like, I'd been there before, and I was like, this is one place not to land, because you're stuck. You've got to, wherever you go, you've got to go backwards. So I landed, and I was in a bit of a state, and I was like, I've stuffed up my whole race, and I phoned Megs, and I was like, you know what, we just have an early night, and I'm gonna have to climb over the mountain in the morning, and and then I sort of walked a bit, and then I was like, actually, it's 1,600 meters of vertical, whatever, 15 Ks. I've got, I think, 4.5 hours. I think if I leave now, I can do that. And so there's massive storms going on, and I phoned Megs, and I'm like, meet me here, like, sandwich ready, jacket ready, and I'm going as light as I can. And then I was like, and I'll send you a pin drop, and I don't know if it's a road. It kind of looks like a road, but if it's not a road, just leave the van on the side of the road, take a tent, and hike up this trail, and you'll find, because in XBerg you can't move. You have to stop at 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you'll find me somewhere. So I sent to the entrance to this road, took all my stuff, and charged off it, and there was lightning going on, and I walked about 45 minutes and came up, and I mean, it's a beautiful place. It's probably today the most beautiful hike I've ever done in my life. But just saw this massive snowy kind of trail going up. I had no snow kit with me, and I was just like, oh, what have I done? And it was the sketchiest climb up and over. But I was just flat chat, just because I knew I had to get there by 9. And there's a great video of Meg driving up this sketchy little road. She's like hysterical, but just killing herself with laughter. And she's like, Mung, yeah, Ben's absolutely mad. He's run over the hill, the main chain of the Pyrenees. And you know what? If I don't find him, I guess he's having a cold night tonight out in the mountains. And it was amazing. I literally came down, and I think I got to her at about 2 minutes to 9, and found her at this weird little, like, campsite in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
Did you talk to your sister in advance? I remember probably for all 4 of my campaigns, the best advice I ever got, and it was actually our team. It was my buddy Bruce, who supported me in the first 2. We got from Tom Payne, who had done it, who had supported, oh my God, the British athlete back in the day, 2009, 2011. And then he did it in 2013 himself. Yeah. Anyway, he said, he wrote a book on it. The guy I'm trying to think, I can't remember his name. Anyway, but Tom said, hey.
Not Ali Andrews.
No, he did really well. He was the British athlete, 2009, 2011. Just drawing a blank. He wrote a great book about the X-Alps as well, which was really helpful for us going into my rookie year. But Tom said, you got to have, what have you guys worked together? What have you guys come up with for conflict resolution? And both Bruce and I went, wait, what? And he said, yeah, you got it. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. You gotta have a plan beforehand, how to deal with them. And we resolved to just, okay, well, we laugh a lot. We seem to have a lot of fun together. Let's just make fun of Gavin, and, we'll try to process the mistake. Hey, what do we do wrong? Let's laugh about it, not make the mistake again, and move on. That's it. We don't get to talk about it ever again. It's just one time. And that worked really well for us, that we would just turn whatever mistake it was into comedy. So kind of like your experience there with your sister, she's just laughing. She doesn't care. She's just having a great adventure, know, and that seemed to work really well. But is that something that you guys talked about beforehand? What are some of the main things you learned, either with your sister or also with the racing beforehand, that helps you in these moments?
Yeah, so, with my sister, I think it's quite unique because we have a really good relationship, and she probably knows me the best out of anyone I could get to support me. So it was probably unwritten, unsaid, but just live there. and it was quite easy between the two of us. When I supported Gabe, we had a whole team. There was a team of 5 of us, and there we spoke about it a lot more. And yeah, it's similar kind of concept of ultimately we're here for fun, and ultimately we said, ultimately Gabe's word is final. So there's one person who, if there's big conflict and we need resolution, Gabe has the final say. But we actually never really got any conflict like that. We all just seem to be quite happy. And I think, for us, for when it's your first, it depends on your expectations. And, XBerg, I had loads of worries going into XBerg, like, am I good enough? Is this stupid? Am I going to kill myself? Am I going to be, 4 days behind everyone? So I really went in with really, really low expectation. And the same, with X-Alps, we were huge underdogs, for sure we had put huge work into it. So there was our own self expectations, but I remember Gabe saying to me, Ben, the number one goal is we avoid the crocodile, which, the executioner, he calls him the crocodile. Yeah. And he said, as long as we avoid the crocodile, then we're happy. I think in
how did you end up on? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think in our campaign, we did make a lot of notes and things, and we really wanted to speak more about conflict resolution. I mean, this came from a lot of your podcasts, and it was a hot topic that we really wanted to address. But we had a plan, but we didn't. It was one of those things that kind of we ran out of time in our prep with it.
Yeah, there's so much to do. Yeah. How did you end up on the team? Let's switch. We were just timing wise here. We should switch over to X-Alps. How did you end up on the team? How did you know Gabe? I mean, from my perspective, Gabe came out of nowhere, and there's always beginner's luck in a sense, but until Gabe got hurt, he was in it. Yeah. And just, from my perspective, all my campaigns, and then also seeing it from the outside, this was a dark horse that nobody saw coming. And it wasn't just beginner's luck. You guys just kept pounding, and, talk about that, because it was truly extraordinary.
Yeah. So, to give you a quick history, basically in my prep for XBerg, I just tried to do as many hike and fly races as I could, and ended up going to Brazil to race. I met a guy, I came to the X-Alps before, I think it was the 2003 X-Alps, and they had this like weird little Austrian race called Hike, Smile and Fly or something. And it was like really quirky, and you'd like fly and land and, throw tennis balls in a hoop and then take off again. And anyways, I think I came, no one knew how the scoring worked, but I think I came second or something. And one of the prizes was an entry to this, the friend of the organizer of the race was there, and they were trying to, promote the race, the hike and fly race in Brazil. So one of the prizes was a free entry to it, and I was on the boat, and I was like, no, I can't go. And then 2 weeks before, literally my plans changed with the boat, and I phoned them and I was like, hey, I know this is ludicrous. It's 2 weeks before the start, but I'm trying to do as many races as I can to qualify for XBerg. Can I come race? And they were super cool. They organized I can't speak Portuguese. They organized me an English speaking supporter. She's also great. No idea about paragliding, seems to be a trend of mine. But helped me get a car, just did everything, and really treated me like I was this rock star hike and fly athlete arriving in Brazil. And so we went and raced there, and it's a really cool race. The people there are amazing, and ended up meeting Gabe there, and we raced together, and we had really bad weather, and ran, I think the second day I did 70K or something on the ground in pretty hot weather. And I was leading and I was second. And on the third day, there was, coming into the finish, there was kind of 2 last turn points, and there was a guy in front of me, and I actually had messaged him and I was like, hey mate, because everyone's so friendly, you know, everyone's together. It's a really cool community. And I was like, what's your plan for tomorrow? I was like, I'm going to tag the turn point and then actually hike back and fly off the back valley. And he's like, oh no, I think that's a bit sketchy. There's no landing there. I'm going to go around the front. So, and he was, you know, maybe 3K in front of me. And so I hiked down, signed the signboard, saw him gliding off down the valley, and I was like, here's my Kriegel moment, you know, here's my chance to win the race. So I shot back up to the top of the hill, took off, and it was working. And when I came down, I checked it and it was working. So I soared up there, but it was still quite early in the morning, and flew across the valley, and it was like it was a really weird day. It was kind of overcast, but it was just starting to lift, and I could feel the lift, but not enough to climb in. And so I sort of eked it out, and then landed probably 10K in front of the guy who had glided down. And I was like, cool, all I've got to do is hike up this next mountain, tag the turn point, and glide to the finish, and I've won. And but I knew Gabe was coming, and Gabe he did a lot of trail running, ultras and things, and I knew he was strong on the ground, and I knew he was behind me, and I knew he could fly. And so I was running through the town, and everyone's cheering me on and stuff, and I've got my phone, and I remember saying to the girl there who does the Instagram, she was filming me, and she was like, oh, going on. And I was like, yeah, but Gabe's coming, watch Gabe. And sure enough, he took off, and he had seen what I did and did the same thing and climbed up. And the race basically ended. It's in Pancus. It's quite a well-known place. I don't know if you heard of it. But on the main launch site there, so it's probably a 600-meter climb up this like rocky face. It's pretty cool. It's like Jurassic Park. And I was climbing up, and Gabe was flying across the valley, and he basically got to the hill at the same altitude as me, but not high enough to top land. And it was kind of working, but not really. So he was soaring along this hill whilst I was climbing up this rock, and we were literally racing to this turn point. And he would go up 10 meters and then sink out a little bit, and I was climbing up, and it was just like neck and neck. And then eventually it kind of switched on, and he managed to climb up top land, and the race was his. And that was a really interesting thing, because I was hiking up, and I went from this like elation that I'm going to win to, just rock dirt, like I've been beaten at the last minute. And I actually stopped on about probably 100 meters vertical from the turn point. And I went down into this real like pit, and then I was like, Ben, what are you doing? Like, look at you, look where you are, look what you've achieved. You're going to be second. Like, this is, and it was a really cool turn point for me, because I really managed to control my mind and kind of pull myself out of that and really appreciate where I was. And, I'm not a mega competitive person. I like to compete. We all do. But I don't have that like burning fire that I have to win. And it was like, it was a really cool point where I found kind of happiness in this moment, and then took off, and then was just so stoked to, it was, one of my first proper races that I'd finished, and flew into the landing, and it was so cool. The coolest thing was to have a Brazilian win. There was 2 or 3 of us. So I don't know if you know Serge. Yeah, you had Serge Durant on the podcast. He was there too. Yeah. So we had a few foreigners, but it was so cool to have a Brazilian win the race. And as you saw in X-Alps, Gabe is just a ball of light. He's such a cool guy. And I think he was more stoked for me than he was for winning the race type thing. And it was like a really emotional, and we just became good friends. And after the race, we were chatting, and he came to me and he said, Ben, what do you think of X-Alps? And I said, yeah, it's something, it's something I would love to try do. But I was like, but you've got to be good. Huh? and he said to me, do you think it's achievable? And I said, yeah, I think it's doable. But I gave him the usual story of, these guys live in the Alps. They start flying when they're 14. They know every valley. They know, the usual story that you hear. And he looked at me and he said, but they're just people, hey, Ben? And I said, what do you mean? He's like, well, they're just like you and me. And I said, sort of, yeah, okay, who's this guy? But good point. And then, we just sort of became friends, and we actually went to Dubai. So one of the for winning that edition of the Transcapi Shaba of the race was an entry to the UAE hike and fly thing. So Gabe went there, and then I actually went to, they had like a fun section, a little small race on the side. So I went, again, just trying to do as much as I could, went to that, and we kind of spent a lot of time in Dubai and really got chatting about X-Alps. And he just had this crazy drive that, we know different. And, if we put in the work and we put in the hours, we can do it. And so I was like,
because he hadn't flown in the Alps, right?
No,
I remember that
never. And he'd been flying. I mean, at that point, he'd been flying 3 years, and he was already on a Zeolite GT, but he's just completely obsessed with it. And so I said to him, let's enter X-Pyr. I'm mentoring, come do it. Let's do it together. So, and he did super well at X-Pyr. He actually led X-Pyr for the first, I think, 3 days, and then slowed down a bit. So that was kind of how we started, and I think it's really cool because he's an engineer too, I'm also an engineer, and we both kind of are very analytical and like technology. And we also think in, whenever we talk and ideas about routes and ideas about flying, we speak the same language, which I think really helps that we both looking at options, and we both really trust each other on decisions, which is, yeah.
Did you guys spend any time scouting before the race, or was it literally just hon and come and go?
No, I had about 3 weeks before the race with him. So I went out in my van, he was in his, and his girlfriend Katty, she was with us too. And we sort of cruised around, we went to Murano and really had fun, just like scouting, doing cool flights. It was a really, really fun week, or couple of weeks together. And then, doing all the prep. I mean, the prep work for X-Alps, there's loads to do. And also not being from there, we didn't have a base. So, we phoned a friend, Maurice Collar. He helped us stick the stickers on the wing, and we're kind of all over the show getting things ready. And we did a lot of, Gabe's super organized, and we did a lot of, not so much scout. We did go to places and scout, but we did a lot of prep work online on Google Earth, and he uses Osmand for hiking, and really looked at a lot of routes and had pretty much 3/4 of the race analyzed on Google Earth, and different. So we never had set routes, but we had option A, option B, and option C, pulled from Skyways, this kind of thing. But what works, where the stuff works, what are the lines guys are flying. And, we wanted to do the whole race, but we ran out of time with the prep.
I mean, so given the shortness of time in his flying career, I mean, if he'd only been flying a couple years when you met him, I mean, he hasn't, there's no chance that he's done a ton of racing, or what do you chalk up just that he was, I mean, because this race, I mean, other than day 2, the weather was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Which typically would support, really good racing pilots.
Yeah.
But he was right in there. I mean, every day he was top 3, top 5. He was smoking along with some of the best pilots in the world.
Yeah.
From a race to goal. I mean, Aaron Duragatti and Kriegel, and I mean, those guys know how to fly fast. What was it? What was he doing that was so? I mean, it from an outside perspective, it was pure magic. It was just, I just kept waiting for the ball to drop.
Yeah.
At some point, this guy's going to make a catastrophic mistake and blow it. But he never did. I mean, he got hurt, but he never really did. He was in there right till the end.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things, After X-Pyr, both him and I really saw the value in competition flying. We both went, okay, you got to learn how to fly fast. So he did do, between X-Pyr and X-Alps, he did do some comps in Brazil. I mean, in 2 years, I don't know how many hours he did, but you're probably up at like 400 or 500 hours per year type thing. He's really pushing hard.
Yeah, a ton.
He's really good in the light stuff and the early stuff. So he learned to fly in the south of Brazil, which is like very different to what we all know Brazil for. And it's really like light marginal conditions, often overcast, small hill. So you take off and you're sitting in 0.2 of a climb for ages, just trying to get up. So he's really good at that. And I think that really helps him, that he can start early. And he can kind of hang around and be really confident that when it's not really working, he can just hang in there until things start working. And then
so he's super patient.
Yeah. And then, I think he just does a lot of studying and understands lines and understands the science behind it. And, he was always, we were talking flat out. I mean, we were on Zello and we used Bernair, and I had Bernair on my laptop, and my girlfriend at the time was actually driving the car, and poor thing, because I don't think I spoke once to her. I was just fixated on live tracking Bernair, live wind, and I was chatting in his ear the whole time. But I said, Gabe, I'm not going to tell you what to do. And this actually came from Tom de Dorlado. And he said, there's such a difference between being in the sky and being on the ground, and you're not up there, you don't know what's going on up there. Sure, you can feed information, but ultimately the pilot knows what's going on. And I really kind of gravitated towards that. So I said to Gabe, I'm not going to tell you what to do unless you specifically ask me. So if you say to me, Ben, I'm stuck, I've got no idea, and we had one moment like that, then I will step in and I'll say, yeah, mate, okay, fly here, I'll send you. We also used with CU, we had CU Cloud running, so I could send him a track log if needed to be, just upload it straight into it. But I was feeding him as much information as I could, with the idea that if I arm him with as much information about what other pilots are doing, where's working, what are live wind conditions, what are possible routes, not what you should take, he then has this arsenal of information that he then frees his mind, and he can go, right, that makes the most sense, I'm going there, or I'm flying that line. And yeah, it seemed to be a recipe that just worked. He said, he constantly said to me, in those first days, yeah, we're flying fast, but the gaggle's not that fast. He's like, as long as you stay with the gaggle, you can stay with it. And he really used the gaggle a lot to, he didn't really push out too much. He was really letting other pilots find the climbs, and then he was just, and there were a few times I was like, oh, we're kind of slipping away, and then he was just perfectly poised, where really almost controlling the gaggle, if you like, and
super disciplined.
Yeah. So I mean, there's not a secret recipe that I can tell you. You know, I think it's a combination of things, and I think we worked really well together, and I know he thinks the same. I think it's, you know, I don't take credit for what he does. I think he's an incredible pilot, but I think having a combination where you work well together really helps. And yeah.
If you guys thought at all, I imagine, you know, in the kind of debrief after the race, you must have talked about what worked, you know, what maybe didn't, what you can improve. I'm wondering where expectation really landed here. Is in some ways, I never did as well as I did my first race, because I was just like you. I came into my first race going, before I got to camp, before I got to the, you know, that kind of pre-race week when there's just so much stuff going on. Yeah. Before I got there, I literally didn't know if I was just going to be eliminated first. I didn't know where I belonged. And, you know, fitness was different back then. You know, now everybody's pretty fit, but in 2015, when I showed up, my first kind of boost of confidence was, okay, half of these people I don't have to worry about because they're not trained as well as I am. I knew that if it became a ground race or we had some bad weather, I knew I was okay. I had trained hard enough. So that was one boost. And then we had the prologue, and I did really well. I was third in the prologue, and that was a proper flying race. So that boosted it. But without those two kind of points of contact, I just had no clue. And I still had no clue. It was still just, whoa, where's it going to come? But that allowed me to be a pilot in the race. What I mean by that is I just kept flying the sky. I just kept doing what I knew how to do. And I didn't worry nearly as much as I did after that, you know, in 2017 onwards. In 2015, I was just having fun. Yeah. And I didn't have any expectations. And that, I flew better than I ever did again, because in the subsequent races, suddenly I had a place. You know, I made Monaco in my first one. I was 8th. I thought, God, I could actually do really well in this race. And then that blew it for me, because then I could never get back in that just free expectations. Just do your thing and have fun. And it seemed like that's what Gabe was really nailing. Yeah. And I'm wondering how does he take that same mindset? Is he going to do it again?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's in an X.
So how does he take that same mindset to the next one? Yeah. You know, that's an interesting one.
I think something that, you know, I know Tarquin really noticed in interviewing us and stuff, was how happy and how stoked he is. And I think that's a bit of a Brazilian thing or a South American thing. It's quite interesting there. You know, I always tell people you can't buy a small beer in Brazil. When you go there, it's always a big beer, and it comes with 4 glasses, and, you know, everyone shares. And when you hike there, you know, where we go, it's really not tourist place. I stick out like a sore thumb. But everyone's so friendly. Somehow these people know my name. You know, I'm not a high level or high profile athlete. You know, I'm just some random South African dude who loves the sport. And you know, it's, you walk past these houses and everyone's in their garden, and there's 50 people having, you know, their version of a braai on a Sunday. And so life is tough. You know, there's a lot of poverty, but people are really happy. And you watch Gabe when he races, and he's running through the town, and he's greeting, you know, every person, the old lady who's walking her dog to the little kids. You know, people cheer him, and he stops and says hello. He's in this like state of wow, you know. And I have some voice notes from him, you know, from Zello, and you can just hear. I'll try to dig them out and send them to you. How, you know, how happy he is, and how much he's just loving being out there. And I think you're right. As soon as you stop worrying too much, you know, ultimately, why are we doing this? You know, we're not going to make you win massive money. You know, you win a trophy at the end. Yeah. So why are we there? And him and I both have the same mentality of, we're there for the love of it. We're there to get to cool places, to have have cool adventures, and I think if you can hang on to that, the performance side comes naturally, because in order to be there, you've got to be good.
It's like a side effect of it instead of the purpose of it. Yeah. Awesome. That you maybe just answered that a little bit there, but I think from the outside perspective, this being your first one, there was a huge drama on social media about, this has just become gladiators, way too much risk.
Yeah.
And you might have heard this show I did with Tom DeDorlado. Those of us who have have been with it for a long time, there was no more risk. I mean, if anything, there was less risk in this one because the weather was so good. I mean, day 2 was dicey, but sometimes it's 8 days of that kind of weather. It's no more risk. It's just social media, making things look bad. And, every team's got a media person, or not every team, most of them. So there's just a lot more content going out there. Yeah. And there's a lot more armchair sailors. There's just a ton of people watching it, and they have opinions. And my opinion is, if you're not competing, you don't get to have an opinion. Screw you. But that's my opinion. But I'm just curious, from many people's perspective, the question of why hangs really big. Sleep exhaustion, cost, wear and tear on the body, training, commitment. There's so much. And of course, the risk. I mean, it's a miracle that no one has died doing this race. Knock on wood. But you've done it. You've competed. You've done a bunch of racing. You've done the support. You just said the event. But why? What is the ultimate? What keeps bringing you back? Why is all of this worth it?
It's an interesting one. For me, I think it's the equation. And to explain that, this concept of it takes, in me trying to get to X-Pyr, I look at the places I went that I would never have gone to. Why would I go to these places for any other reason? And when you start, to give you an idea, I do Born to Fly. The last 3 I did, and I always do it with my dad. And he flies out from South Africa, and it's been a real learning process together, and it's really cool because it's our time together, and it's our little thing. And he drives a van and eats panu chocolats all day, and we race around Borns. And in the one before X-Pyr, actually, I just received my zeolite too, which I was going to do X-Pyr with, and I hiked up. And on the first launch, we from the start hiked up to the first launch. I was pretty fit. I wasn't at the front, but I was in the kind of front pack. Threw my wing out, was on, pulled it up, and, I hadn't really laid it out properly. And as I pulled it up, the wingtip kind of came out, caught a rock, and literally, the thing had 5 hours on it, ripped the whole wingtip off. And I sat there, I pretty much started crying, and I was just like, what the hell, and phoned my dad, and he had flown all the way out from South Africa. And I said, the race is over, what do we do? And sort of hiked down the hill all upset with myself, and then kind of shook that off. And then I went, right, I've got I had my old wing was at a guy's house, and he was actually flying cross country. So I phoned him. I was like, hey mate, any chance I can get my wing? He was like, I'm flying, but my wife will be there in an hour and she can open the door. So I phoned my dad, sent him there, phoned the organizers. They were like, yeah, sure, swap it out, no problem. And then started hiking. And I was literally at the back of the whole, everyone, and it was a cracking day, and I was hiking, and I still had my torn wing. So I hiked the whole first day with my torn wing, didn't fly. And then the second day, swapped wings, took off, met up actually with a friend of mine who was racing, but he was a bit back, and we had an epic flight together. And then, long story short, stuffed it up again, ended up doing a big hiked up right at the back by Grand Bonnard in shorts and t-shirt, and it started snowing, and I sat up in the little ski hut there. But eventually I actually made it to the finish, and I was 80th to cross the line, but I finished with half an hour to the finish, and it was I put a post on my Instagram saying the sport tests you like nothing else in the world, and it takes you to the darkest places, and you do things you never thought you'd do, but when you piece it all together and it works, the results and the outcome of it are so good. It's there's just nothing like it in the world. And I think it's when you go through all these hardships and you're always learning, but when you get it right and you pull off things that you shouldn't be flying now, it's not working, but somehow it works, and you have these amazing flights. There's something really special about it.
That's true, where you find yourself in places having flights or being in spots where I'm constantly going, there's no way I would be here standing on this snow, getting ready to launch at 6 a.m. and there's all this morning glory below me. I can't see anything down at the bottom of the valleys, and I'm going to go paragliding.
Yeah.
This is so cool. This is so cool. There's so many moments like that are really precious.
Yeah.
So he's going to do it again. You're still racing. You're doing the media this year for XBerg.
Yeah.
So that'll be a completely different role. But I'm curious, for this next X-Alps, are you guys already in planning mode? What does the next kind of 18 months look like for you?
So yeah, I mean Gabe has pretty much gone pro athlete, if you like. I mean, he has quite an amazing story. I think he sold his car to go to XBerg and pretty much nearly sold his car to go to X-Alps, and then managed to find some sponsorship. So he's so committed to it. And we haven't really spoken much about the next edition. Whenever we do speak about it, he says, Ben, you're my brother and I need you there with me. So, if he wants me back, I'll be there. We have so much unfinished work to do there. It would be super cool to finish that race. And yeah, it's also on my cards. I toss and turn with it. Half of me goes, it's huge money, it's huge training, it's huge commitment for the race, and should I rather just go do a cool adventure in New Zealand or something? But then it's also the race, and I always come back to the fact that I would really love to have a shot at it. Like I would really, I didn't finish XBerg. I got to the last turn point, and I'd love to have it's funny when you do these things, and if you don't finish, you want to go back, and there's something that's left undone, and so
little tantalizing morsel.
Yeah. I mean, we have spoken. We reviewed this X-Alps, and one thing we really came up with was, on the support side, it is huge work, and how our team worked was, I was kind of, so we only wanted one person in comms with Gabe, and the reason for that was to not have two, just two of you to agree on the same thing is a lot, and you have more input. I think there comes a point very quickly where it's just too much. So we very much identified that there's a role of the direct person, the direct supporter with the athlete, and then there's also this role of the team manager, and I was kind of the team leader, if you like, and it's just way too much, because you're trying to, and I probably didn't do a very good job as team leader because I was so fixated on Gabe and helping him, but you're trying to orchestrate, you've got 2 vans, 4 or 5 people, media team, and you're trying to orchestrate this craziness through the mountains. And it's far when it's good. When Gabe got to Murano, we were like 2 hours behind him here, and I was phoning, trying to organize him via Ferrata kit. It was chaos. But so we've really identified that you need someone to manage the team, manage the logistics, manage all of that. And then you need someone whose actually mind is not involved in any of that at all. And his mind is on racing. And that person is very critical with how they work with the athlete. Because I think that relationship really has a big effect on how well you perform.
What about just less people? It has really changed. Back in the day, most teams had 2 people, and when we started seeing Paul and Tom, and suddenly they had 5 and 3 vans, and you're going, "Whoa, man, that's a lot to manage." Yeah. But it really is. There's a balance here, isn't it? I mean, I don't know where the fulcrum exactly lies.
Yeah, big time. I think it's interesting because having 2 vans is really helpful if you manage it. But then it means 2 of everything, but it means you can daisy chain. So, you can send people ahead. I was always doing the morning hike with Gabe because it was a really good time for me to offload what I'd looked at through the night, all the weather, all of this, route options, what our thinking was for the day, whilst we had an hour and a half hike up to launch. But then I'm behind, hey, because once he's off. So I had a little ultralight 5, and then I'd zoot down into the valley. But having another van that I could send ahead in case he does a glide and hike again, or those type of scenarios, really got us out of trouble in times when we needed it, because I was still an hour, 2 hours behind. And when it's flying that fast, I mean, yeah, it's so hard to keep, even with 2 vans and people going ahead. But it's a whole nother logistical nightmare, and you're trying to then, and that's why I say you need that separation, or you need, that organizer who's really just playing that along. But I think you can overdo it. There were teams at this edition, I think, that had like 7 supporters, and it's so much, to orchestrate all of that is just so much work. And you end up wasting a lot of resources, I think, because you just have people everywhere. So it is the team. It's a really interesting dynamic. It's really an interesting thing to manage, and it's tough because you really have way less sleep than the athletes. People are there, on holiday, or it's their time off, and you're driving a car all day. It's a lot of the time it's not that fun, but you've got to find the good times, and you do. I mean, we had, Gabe and I and the whole team had some absolute magical times up in these mountains. But yeah, I think I think there's a lot to be said for a small team.
My answer to why I keep doing it again is it's the most fun you can have in the world.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. I've never lived as sharply as I have during those campaigns. I mean, the bivvy stuff that I've done, Canada and Alaska, those are brilliant, and it's nice to not have a race component, and you're all in on those as well. But it's pretty fun going to war with your buds.
Yeah,
it's pretty neat. Ben, thanks so much, man. What a blast. I could ask you so many questions about these races, because I just find it all incredibly fascinating and so much fun. And you've got a really unique perspective, but thanks for sharing these stories. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Gav. One thing I want to say just before I go is it's something I actually came into my mind just after we spoke. And it's linked with why we do this. But I'm always amazed at how much you can push your body in the sport. And it's funny story again from Brazil. When I was racing there the first day, before the race, I'd given one of the organizers a lift up one of the hills, and we were flying and stuff. And she only speaks Portuguese, but she followed me on Instagram. And I've never done a marathon. I've really, I wasn't a big athlete. I ran and I was fit, but I'd never done any crazy stuff. And I was running and we did 72 Ks and I was spent, and it was the last day. And she messaged me and was like, "Oh, wow, you're doing so well, blah, blah, blah." And she said, remember, well, Google translated, but she said, remember, your body is stronger than your mind. And I sort of, okay. And then I was hiking the next day, and whenever I got tired, this little voice just came into my head saying, your body is stronger than your mind. And I've kind of adapted that to your body is stronger than your mind can ever imagine it will be. And a lot of people ask me, my training regime's a nightmare. I have 3 months of training and then I have 3 months on a boat doing absolutely nothing. But somehow I still manage to go and run 70 Ks and then the next day run another 50 Ks, and I shouldn't be able to do this. And I think the sport teaches you so much about your mind and your body. And yeah, that's my little motive that keeps me running. So.
Yeah, that is a remarkable thing, especially if you have done the training, then it's surprising how not painful it is too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's pain, but you're in this state in a sense of, part of that I think is flow, but you're also in this state of euphoria, and that there are days where I think there were, it was one day that was like 22,000 feet of vertical in one of my races, where you're just going, this is not possible.
Yeah.
You cannot do this. You on paper, I'm not Kilian Jornet, and I'm doing something that even he would find hard, and you're fine, and you're going to do it the next day, and then you're going to do it the next day. And, your feet look like somebody's hit them with hammers. And it's absolutely mind boggling. My blisters were so bad in 2015 that there were blisters on top of blisters on top of blisters. Aaron Duragatti, I watched him tear the bottom of his feet off at the end of day 2. I mean, he just ripped them off, and it was just kind of bloody and mess, and you keep going. It's awesome. It is awesome. It's really remarkable. Well, cool. Well, man, you've left me in smiles. I'll be watching the XBerg closely. Good luck with documenting all of that. That's a whole nother trip. It's fun. You'll love it. It's a blast, and it's pretty neat. It's kind of it's studying from a totally different perspective. I've learned a ton. I almost wish I would have done that before my first race. I've learned a ton just watching these teams, and you see a lot of different approaches as well. You see the lighthearted approach and the serious approach, and it's fun. You'll learn a ton. You'll have a blast.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Gav. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, and hopefully I can do somewhere near as good a job as you guys do, and hopefully do some cool stuff and grow the sport, and thank you for having me on here. It really is a huge privilege to be on the Mayhem and to chat to you, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So really appreciate it. Thanks for the chat, man.
Cheers, bud. Talk to you soon. If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. All of them incredibly important to keep this show going. You can give us a rating on whatever platform you listen to. You can blog about it on your website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your friends. I know a lot of good conversations have happened that way, and of course, you can support the show financially. The show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, storage, music, behind-the-scenes cost, and all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. We put out a show every 2 weeks, so if you gave us $1 a show, that's $25 a year. Quite a bit less than a magazine subscription and way less than a latte a month. You'll notice we don't have 10 minutes of advertising at the top of the show, which we get asked to do all the time, believe me. I believe advertising is a pretty toxic business model, and I want you, the listener, to know that these conversations are just authentic people giving their opinions, and we aren't being swayed by brands. But that means we rely on you, our listener. If and only if you can support the show and it doesn't hurt your pocketbook, we'd really appreciate it. Go to the website to find various ways to support the show through Patreon or other platforms where we've gone through great lengths to minimize fees so your money gets directly to us. Becoming a subscriber gives you access to all kinds of bonus information, little nuggets that don't make it into the podcast, extra content, our Ask Me Anything shows, and a lot more. We don't put anything behind a paywall and never will. If you can't afford to support the show, just send me an email and I'll set you up with an account, no questions asked. Hopefully someday you'll be in a position where you can. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. We'll see you at Cloud Base.